My name is Stephen Folker.
This is independent filmmaker Frank Carrillo.
Hey, this is Susan Johnston.
Hey guys, this is Ryan Alexander.
This is Ben Foster.
And this is Mark Dennis from Time Trap, and you're listening to the Indie Film Place podcast.
Hey, it's Don Coscarelli, the director of Phantasm and Bubba Hotep, and I love Indie Film Place.
Hello, and welcome to the Indie Film Place. Come on in. Join us for daily motivation, interesting chat, interviews with industry pros, tutorials, DIY, and much more. This is the complete podcast for independent filmmakers. And now, here is your host, Russ Coute.
Hey everybody, what is going on? Welcome to the Indie Film Place. Come on in and let's chat. All right, today we're chatting about editing, the editing portion of our workflow of our production. And my guest today, I am very happy to have Lawrence Jordan. He's been in the business for a while. He's an editor. He's just some of the stuff that he's done: Spies Like Us, Fallen, Assassins, Deuce Bigalow, Jack Frost, TV shows like CSI Miami, and also did sound on Back to the Future, which is it's a classic, man. Larry, it is fantastic to have you today. How are you?
Hi, Russ. Thank you. Very glad to be here. And we're making a movie, so it's. I might sound a little tired because we're kind of at the end of the road here, but okay. I'm very, very glad to be here.
Excellent. And so you are working as we speak.
Yeah, we just had a visual effects review. I'm working on a film that has about somewhere in the neighborhood between 12 and 1,400 shots. So it's been pretty intense. A lot of time spent looking at actual shots and reviewing them and having the director approve them. So that it's kind of come down to it at the end of the process, and just powering through it.
Absolutely. Powering through the workflow. And that's something that I want to talk about too, is an online course that you have, we'll get to in a minute. It's called Master the Workflow. But yeah, so, being in the editing room and the editing being such a crucial part, obviously, of the whole process, and seen really as such a technical part. I mean, before I learned editing, I always thought, I'm going to leave that to the editor, because that's what they do. And there's something to that, of course. But I want to talk about Zen and the art of editing. Is there? Do you think there is such a thing? I mean, is editing something that somebody has a natural talent for, or is it something that has to be learned? Is there particular skills that you need to come to the table with to become an editor?
Well, I that's a good question, and I'd like to answer both your Zen and the art of editing question, and whether you need a natural ability. I think that all of us have certain creative abilities. I think that if you are a person who might have some sort of sense of rhythm and timing, you might make a better editor than someone who doesn't. Maybe someone who has a much more of a kind of a left brain. But editing is kind of a very unique combination of left and right brain, because it is quite technical in some respects. I think that you can definitely get better at the craft, and I think you are like wine as an editor. You really, you age and you get better with time. I think the more time you spend editing, the more time you spend in the process with directors and producers and the rest of your team, the better you get at working with all of them. And that's a big part of the job also that a lot of people probably don't have any idea about, because they think it's just, sitting behind the machine and doing actual edits. So there's a lot of elements of editing, and yes, again, I think if someone has sort of like a natural creative bent, that's certainly helpful. But I definitely think it's a skill that can be refined and acquired, and something you can get better at. In terms of Zen and the art of editing, I it's interesting that you ask about that, because I do find myself really, it's been quite a few years, but I really do find myself when I'm working, getting into a very calm and quiet place nowadays. After doing this for 38 years, I'd say it was the diametric opposite when I started out in the business, and I was a young assistant editor, and my early days of editing, I was nervous, I was anxious, I was jerky, and as time has gone by, you develop sort of like your own, sense of confidence, and also you learn to put your ego by the wayside, because really, it doesn't really serve you very well, I don't think, as an editor. I mean, I express my opinion with the people I work with when, I think it's kind of important. But it's really nice to get to a place where you can kind of just, sit back and work in a collaborative fashion with the director, and then producers get involved, and even the studio and others. And kind of like it becomes a give and take, and you're not feeling threatened anymore, and you're kind of cruising along in your zone. And I think that's a real, it's a real valuable sort of goal for young editors to think about. I think it's a good place to aspire to, because I think that, I find myself at my most creative nowadays, because I'm just sort of going with the flow, as we used to say back in the day.
Right. Roll with it, go with the flow. And that's because you talk about getting into the rhythm, and it really seems like it is a rhythmic thing, and I know that is with myself as well. Being such a crucial part of the whole thing. And I talk on the show about, what is the most important part of the filmmaking process. And, the old saying is always, somebody can forgive a bad picture, but they can't forgive bad sound. And, we talk about that a lot, but also, I think, especially nowadays with the technology, we don't have any reason for a bad picture or bad sound. And, the hand isn't more important than the foot, right? And
sure.
I think every part is so crucial. And, like with the characters and the flow of the story, in the editing, you have to have that sense of how the story and the flow and the characters are going, correct?
Yeah, rhythm and flow works in on a number of levels in editorial. You're kind of concerned with the rhythm and flow from shot to shot, and then within the entirety of the scene, and then of course over the entire arc of the story that you're trying to tell. So I think that there's sort of a more cerebral and analytical aspect of being a film editor, which is once you've assembled the entire movie and you've gone through it, and then you go through it with the director, and you really try to, shape the most engaging, product that you can. Right. And, that, like I say, works on a lot of levels. So, it's really important to be a good editor per se, on a technical level, and have a sense of timing. And then it's, ultimately very important to be a good storyteller. And, but, a lot of times I find the best storytellers are, the writers of the project,
Right.
for obvious reasons. And if you're working with a good director, they'll have a very, very solid handle on where the story needs to go.
Right.
So that's it's a tremendous help when you're editing a film, but it's really, like I say, it's really a collaborative process, and the director drives the ship for the most part.
Sure. And you've worked on, a lot of studio films, larger studio films. Do you is most of the in the editing room? Do you get in there by yourself, or is there is the director in there a lot with you?
Well, there's what I call like the honeymoon period, but it's really just a honeymoon period with me and myself, where when they're shooting the film and I get to do my first cut, which is really kind of like, a period of time when you can indulge all of your creative ideas, and you can go down different roads, and some of those roads will lead you nowhere and other roads will lead you to wonderful places. And that's during the entire, shoot process, because on most of the films I've ever worked on, I'm editing concurrently with the shooting, so I can deliver a first cut or a first assembly as soon as they're finished. It's the most efficient way that studio films and network shows work, and then you get into the next stage, which is the director's cut, and that's also a super exciting place, because as an editor you've put in a lot of stuff that in your heart of hearts you get a pretty good feeling or pretty good instinct that this is never going to end up in the film. But as an editor, it's our responsibility to show the director, unless they've asked us not to, but to show the director everything he or she has shot. And the director's cut is again, it's a great period of time where you're exploring all the different options. I mean, I've worked on films where the first cut was over 5 hours, and it's pretty rare these days that you release a film anywhere near that long.
Right.
So it's again going in there and working with individual scenes, and then finding which works best, and then kind of taking out what doesn't. So and then of course you get into the end with producers' notes and studio notes, and that can be anywhere along the spectrum from sublime to ridiculous. You've got all kinds of people who have all kinds of levels of experience and talents, and let's say mandates to make a certain type of movie a certain way. So that becomes kind of a give and take process between mostly the director and the producers and the studio. But it's always fun nonetheless, and it's always interesting. And as an editor, to a great extent, I try to stay out of the line of fire during that part of the process.
Okay. Yeah. And and one of the questions I wanted to ask, speaking of that, is, do you like to spend time on set to kind of get an idea how the shooting is going, or do you like to just completely stay away from that?
I really enjoy being on the set, especially today, because truth be told, I am a bit of a kind of a technophile, and there are so many new tools, especially with the director that I've been working with. This is my third film. This is our third film together, Mike Titus, who directed this film that I'm finishing up called Sextuplets for Netflix.
Okay, cool.
Mike is an incredibly talented guy, and he's very well versed with the tools of his trade, the cranes and the cameras and the lenses. And, he's got an art school background, and, he's taught himself a lot. And just to get on set and to see some of these like really amazing, tools that people are using these days is fascinating. As a quick aside on this film, because the lead actor plays 7 roles, they used a lot of motion control. They used a lot of motion control shots, and it's this thing called a techno dolly. It's a computerized crane that can repeat motion, and just seeing how that worked and what was involved and how the visual effects people sort of collaborated with the camera people and obviously the director, was really fascinating. So long story short, in answer to your question, I do enjoy the set. But it's like anything else. It's a rabbit hole that you can get lost down. And, I got a lot of film to cut. So,
Right.
I got to get back into my little cubby hole. And, in fact, on this film, they shot, close to 200 hours of source material, for what's ultimately ending up to be about a 90-minute film. So,
Okay.
it's a lot of material that needs to be gone through.
Yeah. That's a lot of material. What made you want to become an editor? I mean, was it because of just the technical with the storytelling Zen thing, or is it something? No.
I nothing as lofty as that. No, I grew up in a film family. My grandfather was a projectionist in the Nickelodeon days, and then he went on to be a projectionist in Times Square and in theaters in the Bronx and Manhattan. And my father became an editor from my grandfather's work in the film. And my father worked in the commercial business, made some of the earliest TV commercials, and then he came out here and he was making trailers. So it was really kind of a part of my life. And my father's sister ended up marrying a film editor, and I went and saw one of the films that he edited when I was about 19 years old, called Apocalypse Now. And I saw that film, and it really moved me so dramatically that I said, that's really, I've got an in here. I've got a way to probably get my foot into the cutting room, and if I could participate in any kind of small way in an epic project like that, I'd be a happy camper. So that's kind of like when I made my decision. I unfortunately haven't really worked on anything that epic up to this point, but nonetheless, it's still a very satisfying and creative job, and I'm pretty happy with it. I love the people that I get to work with, and the characters of all sorts, shapes and sizes. So that's kind of how I got into it.
That is awesome. And there's films that epic don't happen every day. So
no, they're pretty rare. Pretty rare.
Absolutely. Now, and talking about getting the foot in the door, somebody that wants to be an editor or is an editor and wants to get into the business, what do you suggest for that? I mean, what's your wisdom on that?
Yeah, well, when I got into the business almost 40 years ago, it was a different landscape. Hollywood, to a large extent, was a really closed shop, and it was very tough to get into the unions. And initially I thought maybe I would want to be a cameraman because I loved photography as a kid, and I did some work towards that at first, and it was. I was sort of advised that it was going to be very difficult. So I gravitated more towards editing. And then, like I say, I saw this film, and I was just, the editing in that film was just so powerful. But today, honestly, it's much different. It's become much more of, an accessible career path to people. You don't necessarily have to have an uncle in the business, as they used to say.
Right.
I think that if you are a passionate filmmaker and you really love, the process, and you're focused and you go for it, I think anybody who really wants to become a film editor or work in post-production in some other form can do that. I mean, and plus, I mean, let's just face it, the amount of content that's being created today is exponentially greater than what was being created back when I started on, in 35 millimeter, and even before that, 16 millimeter film. So there's so many more opportunities, and it's just being focused and really, really, having direction, and not getting discouraged, because maybe it won't happen overnight, but if you really stay focused, it'll happen for you.
Yeah. I mean, now, do you like, talking about the technology, and then, shooting and editing on 35 and 16? I mean, do you, obviously everything has its place, and we are where we are with technology. Say, Quentin Tarantino just, shoots on film. And I mean, do you prefer editing film, or do you like working with the digital? I mean, is there something that you feel more akin to?
Well, Russ, it's, we've really gone through the looking glass. I mean, it's there's no turning back from digital technology in every, form of our life at this point.
Right.
And, I have tremendously fond memories of working on 35 and the process that was. However, digital is here. It's got tremendous power, and it's got tremendous advantages. So I've just tried to adapt to that rhythm, and look, I don't think I've even tried. I mean, I've adapted to that rhythm. I was one of the first guys in town to work on films that were edited digitally back in the early 90s when the Avid first hit town.
Right.
And when Final Cut Pro first came out, I was a consultant to the man who developed that, and who developed Adobe Premiere. So I'm sort of very integrally involved in what's happening even today on the latest developments of editing tools and post-production tools, to the best of my ability. Again, it comes down to a rhythm thing. With film, you would cut a scene, and then you would put it up on the chem or even a projection room, and you'd look at it. It was a much slower process. Yeah. And, sometimes that would have its disadvantages, but a lot of times, some of the advantages of working that way, where you had more time to, kind of like absorb what you just saw, right, and think about, the results of your work and the ramifications of the changes you made. Today, you could make hundreds of versions and, not be home for dinner. You know what I mean? It's like, so you have to sort of understand that rhythm, and, understand younger directors' rhythms when they're able to make those changes so quickly, and, sometimes have a conversation about, like, we really haven't had an opportunity to sit back and look at the film as a whole and how these changes have impacted it. So it's kind of just, getting used to that pace. But again, the short answer is, I love digital. I love computers, and I love the things that you can do with them these days. So it's just kind of learning how to tame the beast a little bit.
You have more access and more control. I think.
Yeah.
Now, do you think filmmakers, I mean, editing being such a key part, do you think filmmakers as a whole should be editors, or at least understand it, or at least be able to go in and cut something that they're working on?
Oh yeah, I think that's a great asset. I think any young filmmaker, independent filmmaker or director, or someone who's aspiring to do big studio films, learning the editing process. I mean, you don't have to become an editor, but is just invaluable. Most of the young directors coming up today already do know how to edit, though, because editing tools have become so affordable, and they come on most of the computers that elementary school kids work on, so it's really become part of the language of these kids who have a interest in sort of these creative pursuits. My director is a fine editor himself, but it's kind of like that old saying, you can do so many things, but it's kind of like one of these things where you focus on the things that you do really well and that you want to do, and that's probably where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. But yeah, I studied acting when I was younger. I really was involved in looking at becoming a cinematographer for a long time. And all of those things, even though I didn't become an actor or a cinematographer, they really, informed my, film education.
Yeah.
So I say go out and learn as much as you can. And I'm still learning, man. I mean, on this film, the visual effects education that I've received has been, like I always say, it's like getting another master's degree.
Nice. And speaking of which, I mean, somebody that's thinking they're getting into it, they're doing indie films, they're doing whatever they're doing, and they say, I want to go to film school, or should I go to film school? Should I not go to film school? What do you think about that?
Well, I would never discourage someone from going to film school, but I think that what people have to understand is what are their expectations that film school is going to provide for them. There's no guarantee that you're going to, take that film education and turn it into a paying job, if that's indeed what you need once you get out of that school. And there are different tracks in film school. Obviously, there's film criticism, and there's producing and things like that. And I would never dissuade people from going to film school. If for anything else, you're going to work your whole life in a very difficult business, you might as well take that 4 years and take some bumps and bruises in a safer environment.
Right.
But the actual film industry and how it works is a much different world. It's the real world, and sometimes the bumps and bruises can be, a little bit tougher. And it's important that you learn how the process is practiced, the workflow is practiced. And, that's really the only way that you can, progress in a lot of the crafts, cinematography and editing is by having done it and having gone through the process.
That's where the real learning starts.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, very cool. And because I mean that's something that I've always talked about too is actually doing something and learning it. If being able to jump in. And one of my thoughts is, the best way to, if you're new to an area, the best way to learn your way around is to get lost. And,
right.
And you find that you get to learn it, real quick. And a lot of times you get lost, you just, use that as an excuse to location scout. Which is,
yeah. And that's one of the great things about being, an indie filmmaker, which I'm sure a lot of your audience, is that you get to, wear so many hats. Yeah. And you get a taste of what a lot of different kind of, people do and what different crafts are. I know a lot of indie filmmakers who, they're their own assistant editor. They don't have someone who they can kind of turn to and do everything. And they don't have a sound team, and they don't have a visual effects team. They're
right.
doing everything themselves. And, that's probably a very good, way to get your foundation of what everybody does. But it's also nice once you get into a little bit of a higher budget sort of world where you can have an assistant,
Right.
and that helps you accelerate the process and meet schedules and things like that. So, but you go in there, like you say, and learn as much as you can on your own, while you can afford to do that, and then move on from there.
Yeah. Great. Great stuff there. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit, about being on set and just kind of be a part of what's going on when you edit. What do you want? What do you expect, need from production, to help you the most with the editing?
When you say production, I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, like coverage, footage. I mean, do you like? I mean, because it's always, we've always learned that just having a lot of takes is giving the editor choices. Obviously, you like choices. I mean, do you like just if you're working with a director that is just is doing a ton of takes for something, and then there's the other director that's just okay, one or two takes and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the director's call.
Mm-hmm.
I really haven't worked with too many directors that only do a few takes.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's because over the last dozen years or so, I've sort of been more involved in the comedy genre, and there's a lot of improv in comedy. I really let I really let the director deliver what they deliver to me.
Right.
Sometimes it's beautiful and poetic, and we get great performances, and other times you don't, and that presents a new a set of problems that you have to solve. I mean,
Right.
Film editing really is always about solving problems, because nothing happens on the set the way everyone envisions it. It's
Right.
just the nature of the beast. So we solve these problems in editorial in a number of different ways. And, but, I mean, my hope going into any film is that I'm going to get, really great coverage, really great cinematography, and really great performances from the actors. That's really all you can, sort of hope for.
Right.
And then you kind of you run with it.
Excellent. Good stuff. Well, and now you have the Master the Workflow course. I want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, Master the Workflow is the name of the actual company or the website, and the course is called Feature Film Assistant Editor Immersion 1.0, and it's a course that I developed with one of my previous assistants, a guy I did a couple of films with, Richard Sanchez, who's a fantastic assistant, and when you want to get into sort of mainstream filmmaking and studio filmmaking and network filmmaking, and now of course streaming network filmmaking, it's a very specific workflow.
Right.
And it's something that's been developed over the decades and decades of filmmaking. I mean, there was sort of a film paradigm, and then of course the digital paradigm came along, which was largely based on the film paradigm. And again, you get a taste of that maybe in film school, but it's quite a unique difference when you get into the real world. And Richard had developed this workflow, and we started talking about it. And I had previously taught some classes on digital filmmaking at the AFI and UCLA Extension.
Yeah.
And, I thought, wow, this would be a great opportunity to teach the next generation of film editors exactly how the process works. And we could put it online, and, we could reach a lot of people now because of the internet. And, we thought, well, who knows, maybe this is a good idea, maybe this isn't. And we put a little post up on one of the groups that, a lot of, aspiring filmmakers and editors hang out on Facebook. And in 48 hours, we had 300 responses that there would be a lot of interest.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
we knew that there was going to be something there.
Yeah.
And over the course of the next 6 months or so, Richard and I developed an outline and the course. And basically, we take our students from before production even starts, pre-production, all the way through final delivery, exactly the skills and tasks and processes that they need to know to be successful on a studio level or a network level. So it's a very high level course. We're not teaching people how to work a program or something. You come into our program having a fundamental knowledge of, it could be Avid Media Composer or Adobe Premiere or even Final Cut Pro. And, we teach the process on the Avid, but it can be applied to any of these other programs to a great extent. Okay. And we also try to teach a lot about what it's like to be in the editing room environment during the course of a feature film, what it's like to work with directors, what it's like to work with an editor, the politics of the editing room, because you're working with a lot of creative individuals. Yeah. And you got to kind of learn those ropes, like I mentioned early on in our conversation. So we really kind of try to give an insider's look at the editorial process, and we've had a tremendous success and great feedback from our students. We've sold the course in over 30 countries around the world, and wow. It's a thrill because when people say how much they're getting at it and how much it's benefited their career, that's a very satisfying feeling. And also to know that this next generation of editors is going to really know their chops, or at least have a really good handle on them once they get their foot in the door. Right. It's a good feeling.
That is gold. That stuff is gold. Real world stuff, and in a practical format, practical setting, and that is awesome.
It's a structured course. You can go out on the internet, obviously, and find any number of YouTube videos, sure, or online sites that will teach you. But again, and I'm as humble as possible as saying that we're really Richard and I are guys who've been in the trenches. Exactly. I'm going on close to 40 years of making films. I've done almost 60 projects. And, so we wanted to give people a realistic idea of what they're getting into. Yeah.
That's good stuff. And I can tell you have, you want to help others succeed, and that is that's just an awesome thing.
We have a blog, obviously, and we're trying to create as much content as we can. Considering that we're both full-time editors. Yeah. So it's tricky, but we're working with, other filmmakers and writers. And, I try to do interviews with some of the people that we work with. Again, and this is all sort of like free content in addition to the course, again, so we can give, these people just sort of like getting their start, like a better idea of what our world is like. Because again, it's not like working at an insurance agency or, or a car sales dealership. It's a very unique world, the filmmaking world, and it's got its landmines and its quirks. So just trying to give people a good overview of what to look out for and what to expect.
No, this is the only industry that that I mean, a doctor, a lawyer. I mean, you got grad school, you got college, then you got your degrees, and and you go out and you start a practice, you intern or whatever, and you have a track that you're on.
Yes, it's a very clear path. Exactly.
Yeah, and not so much here.
No, exactly. And that's, I think, what attracts people who like us, who like to do this, because it's somewhat of a voyage of discovery, and it's somewhat of an adventure, and it's maybe a little bit more creative in sort of a unique way. Although I'm sure brain surgery is probably a very creative and process also.
Yeah, I think I find creativity in everything. I mean, cooking, sewing, whatever. I mean,
absolutely.
Brain surgery. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a clear path with that, and this is like, more kind of a Zen thing, I guess. But,
yeah, exactly. I mean, what is it really about? I mean, so much of it is about just solving problems, and you can do that either creatively or you can do that miserably.
Right. No, that's awesome. And what you're doing is really about community, and I'm into that. That is so cool. Now you're premiering the course at the ACE, the American Cinema.
No. The course is online. We're opening another session on June 10th, but we're participating in ACE Tech Fest, which will be held this Saturday at Universal Studios. Nice. We'll be there along with some pretty cool companies, Avid, Adobe, Blackmagic will be there, and then Netflix is going to present, or except not present, but they'll be a sponsor. Mm-hmm. So we'll get a chance to meet a bunch of people and kind of talk about filmmaking in the course, and hopefully make some friends.
That is awesome. I actually bet when this goes live, you would have already been there. But so tell me how was it? How was it on Saturday?
Well, I'm sure it'll be great. I've done a bunch of events with ACE, and they're sort of an informal partner with Master the Workflow. I'm an ACE member, and this is another part of our mission, which is really kind of letting the world know what editors do, what the film editing craft is about, hopefully garnering a little more respect for the editor. It's a very sort of mysterious craft. Most people don't know what it is, and you had mentioned early on that part of our mission is to help people who might not normally or haven't traditionally been given the opportunity to take this kind of course or get into the film industry. We offer scholarships to ACE interns and people who have gotten into some of their fellowship programs. And then, of course, we've worked with some other organizations to try to give people, in lower income, situations, an opportunity to take the course and learn what our world is about. It's really important to me personally that, everyone be able to find, their creative voice and express themselves if that's what, they truly desire to do. So, I'm happy to be able to do that and help out in any way possible.
That is so awesome, and yeah, I mean, I think this is something that everybody needs to hear, and I think a lot of people that haven't done editing, I mean, it's kind of another world thing. It's kind of a scary thing a little bit. I mean, it can be, and when you don't understand it. I mean, before I learned how to edit, I mean, I was just like, I just want to let let the editors do that. But and this is so key. I mean, this is a lot of good stuff here, and I think it's what people need. So that is very cool.
Oh, thanks, man.
How does somebody find out about that? Where does somebody go to get the details? I mean, the website, socials.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing to do is follow us on Facebook. Master the Workflow is the name of the Facebook group. We have a public group, and then we have a private group for our students who have enrolled or been given access through a scholarship or what have you. And it's a great little community that we're building. We've got about 3,000 people so far. I mean, we're not fooling ourselves. That's not a huge number, but it's our own little niche. And check out our website at mastertheworkflow.com. They can get some information there. They can always shoot us an email at info@mastertheworkflow.com. And, check out some of the other editing, sort of guilds and organizations. I would go to acefilmeditors.com. I'd go to motionpictureeditorsguild.com. And get yourself out there. There's a lot of free events, and, some of them have a fee, but, they're usually not that expensive. Mm-hmm. Get out there, go to some of these events. This is where the editor's world sort of revolves, and you'll meet other people who are kind of maybe on the same path as you. And, that's where you begin in this sort of journey. It's kind of becoming a cliche with us because people ask us all the time, how do we get started? And, it's really about networking and keeping your eyes and ears open. Yes. And developing relationships with people who you might have an opportunity to work with, or, you just might be able to develop a friendship, and who knows who they know or who you know. And that's how connections happen, and
Absolutely.
that's how people get started.
Network, community. That is awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
This is. Thank you for being here, Larry. Thank you for hanging out with me here and talking about this stuff. It's very cool. I'm energized. I'm motivated, and I know this is stuff that some folks need to hear. So that's good. I'm very encouraged that this is a community that you have going here.
Thanks, Russ. Thank you. That's really nice of you, Russ.
Absolutely. One more thing. If you were to say, if you were to meet yourself, your younger self, before you got into all this, what's the one thing that you would say to yourself?
I would say, don't be so hard on yourself, Larry.
That's good.
It's all going to work out.
Good.
I think that as young people, we are anxious and worried about what other people think of us, and we don't think that we're good enough or smart enough. And gosh darn it, we are.
and people like you.
As you get older, you realize how smart you are.
Yeah.
And you kind of wish you didn't wait that long to understand that.
Oh my gosh, that's true. I mean, I wish I had the old saying, I wish I knew then what I know now, and I wish
Right.
I had the drive and the focus, in the youth. There's saying that youth is wasted on the young people, but
yeah, it's funny. But there are those, shining lights that you see,
absolutely.
those kids who are like, in their early 20s, and they're ready to direct their first film, and they just get it. Either they've developed the confidence, or they just have a natural gift, and it's like this whole confluence of factors, and they go out there and they just set the world on fire. But those are the rarities, those are the Mozarts or the Picassos or, what have you.
Yeah.
Most of us really, we have to fight the good fight and sort of really just have some grit and stick it out. And, that, I don't think that's, more true in any business, besides ours.
Exactly. No, that is absolutely true. And I love hearing, because, since I launched the podcast, since I've been doing it for a little over a year now, and and the response that I get from people, filmmakers that are just starting out, and young filmmakers that do have that drive, and they're excited about doing it, and they get out and do it, and they create something that is that's cool. Your first thing isn't always going to be a masterpiece, but the next one's going to be a lot better, and the next one after that's going to be a lot better, and just get out and do it.
Very true.
I
Very
love
true.
hearing when people are doing that. Cool.
Yeah.
This was very good. Thank you again for being here. And folks, check this out. Seriously, really do this. Go to mastertheworkflow.com. Email at info@mastertheworkflow.com. Check out the socials. It's all Master the Workflow. You just type that in, and you'll find it. Go to Facebook and find the groups Master the Workflow. This is good stuff. Again, Larry, thank you. And
my
guys,
pleasure, man. Thank you.
This is cool stuff. Thank you all for being here and hanging out with Larry and myself. And if you have any questions, comments, ideas, whatever, hit me up. Send me a line at hello@theindiefilmplace.com. And check out the website if you haven't gone there, theindiefilmplace.com, of course. And thank you again for being here. This is our place. This is the Indie Film Place, and this is where we are keeping the dream alive one day at a time. Peace.